Okay, guys, we have an extreme close-up today, but I couldn't figure out how to get prop my thing. So, we're going to be starting at Cautionary Advice to the Wise, which is chapter 2. In this book, it's page 69. So try to find it in yours. That evening, after his walk around town, the Bishop of Dean stayed in his room quite late. He was busy with his great work on duty, which unfortunately he never completed. He was carefully dissecting all that the fathers and philosophers have said on this serious topic. His book was divided into 2 parts. First, the duties of all. Secondly, the duties of each according to one's position in life. The duties of all are the principal duties. So the duties aren't important. The Bishop of Dean is important for later, so make sure you have quotes on him. There are 4, as set forth by St. Matthew: duty toward God, toward ourselves, toward our neighbor, and toward animals. As to the other duties, the bishop found them defined and just prescribed elsewhere, those of sovereigns and subjects in the epistle to the Romans. This stuff's not important. So go down to the next paragraph. At 8, he was still at work, writing with some inconvenience on little slips of paper, holding a large book open to his knees, when Madame Magloire, as usual, came in to take the silver from the cupboard near the bed. A moment later, the bishop, knowing that the table was laid and that his sister was perhaps waiting, closed his book and went into the dining room. The dining room was oblong, with a fireplace and a door onto the street, as we have said, and a window on the garden. Madame Magloire had just finished putting down the silver. While setting the table, she was talking to Mademoiselle Baptistine. There was a lamp on the table near the fireplace where a good fire was burning. One can easily imagine these 2 women, both past their 60th year, Madame Magloire, small, fat, and quick, Mademoiselle Baptistine, sweet, thin, fragile, a little taller than her brother, wearing a puce-colored silk dress, a shade quite fashionable in 1806, the year she had bought it in Paris. To use a popular comparison, which says in a few words what a page could barely express, Madame Magloire looked like a peasant, and Madame Baptistine like a lady. Madame Magloire wore a white funnel-shaped cap, a gold cross at her neck, the only bit of feminine jewelry in the house, a snowy fichu just peering out above a heavy black wool dress with wide short sleeves, a green and red checked calico apron tied at the waist with a green ribbon pinned up in front. She wore coarse shoes and yellow stockings, like the women of Marseille. Mademoiselle Baptistine's dress, in the style of 1806, had a short waist, narrow skirt, sleeves with epaulettes and flaps and buttons. Her gray hair was hidden under a frizzy wig called à l'enfant. Madame Magloire had an intelligent, clever, lively air. The 2 corners of her mouth rose unevenly, and the upper lip protruded beyond the lower, making her seem somewhat rough and imperious. So long as the bishop was silent, she talked to him without inhibition, though with respect. But once he spoke, as we have seen, she would implicitly obey, like Mademoiselle. Mademoiselle Baptistine, however, did not speak. She confined herself to obeying and endeavoring to please. Even when young, she had not been pretty. She had very prominent blue eyes and a long pinched nose, but her whole face and person, as we have said at the outset, breathed an indescribable goodness. She had been preordained to meekness, but faith, charity, hope, the 3 virtues that gently warmed the heart, had gradually elevated this meekness to sanctity. Nature had made her a lamb, religion had made her an angel. Poor sainted woman, tender, long-vanished memory. Mademoiselle Baptistine so often told what happened at the bishop's house that evening that many still alive can recall the tiniest details. Just as the bishop entered, Madame Magloire was speaking vivaciously. She was talking to Mademoiselle on a familiar subject, one to which the bishop was quite accustomed. It was a discussion about the way to secure the front door. It seems that while Madame Magloire was shopping for supper, she had heard the news in various places about an evil-looking runaway, a suspicious vagabond who had arrived and was lurking somewhere in town. Some unpleasant adventures might happen to anyone who came home late that night. Also, there was talk the police were not doing their jobs, because the prefect and the mayor did not like one another, and each was hoping to injure the other by provoking incidents. was up to intelligent people to protect themselves. So everyone ought to be careful to shut up, bolt, and bar his house properly, and secure his door thoroughly. So remember, this is Jean Valjean they're talking about. So at this point in the book, there's nothing that he seems to have done that would cause this degree of problems with the community. Madame Magloire emphasized these last words, but the bishop, having come from a cold room, sat down in front of the fire and began to warm himself, and so he was thinking of something else. He did not hear a word of what Madame Magloire had just said, and she repeated it. Then Mademoiselle Baptistine, trying to satisfy Madame Magloire without displeasing her brother, ventured to say timidly, "Brother, did you hear what Madame Magloire said?" "I vaguely heard some of it," the bishop said. Then turning his chair half round, putting his hands on his knees, and raising to the old servant his good-humored face, which the firelight illuminated, he said, "Well, then, what's the matter? Are we in any great danger?" Madame Magloire began her story again, unconsciously exaggerating it a little more. It appeared that a barefoot gypsy, some sort of a dangerous beggar, was in town. He had gone for lodging to Jacquin Labarre, who had refused him. He had been seen entering the town by the boulevard Gassendi and roaming through the streets at dusk, a man with a knapsack and a rope and a terrible-looking face. "Really," said the bishop. The willingness to question her encouraged Madame Magloire. It seemed to indicate the bishop was actually almost worried. She continued triumphantly, "Yes, Monsieur, it's true. Something will happen tonight in town. Everybody says so. The police are so badly organized. To live in this mountainous country and not even have street lamps, if you go out, it's black as your pocket. And I say Monsieur and Mademoiselle agrees." "Me?" interrupted the sister. "I say nothing. Whatever my brother does is fine." Madame Magloire went on as if she had not heard this protest. "We say this house is not safe at all. And if Monsieur will allow me, I will go and tell Paulin Monsieboy, the locksmith, to come and put the old bolts back on the door. We have them right here, and it will only take a minute. I say we must have bolts, if only for tonight. Nothing could be worse than a door that can be opened from the outside by the first comer. And anyway, the Monsieur has the habit of saying, 'Come in,' even at midnight. But my heavens, there's no need even to ask permission." At this moment, there was a violent knock on the door. "Come in," said the bishop.